I didn't know anyone associated with the Muppets, and they had come to me and asked if I would be interested in interviewing for the job. They had decided to start up the franchise again, and they had the deal with ABC to produce another half-hour Muppet show. The call I got was from I maybe Alex Rockwell, who was the one of the executive producers of the show, or producer of the show, and asked if I would come in for an interview. So I guess it was just basically maybe off of my work on SCTV and Larry Sanders and things like that, that they had sought me out. So I went in and interviewed for it and got the job. They had the idea of kind of doing a little bit of a redo on the old Muppet Show, and the idea being now it takes place in a television studio instead of a theater. All that stuff was in place. When I got there, they pitched that idea to me. They also pitched to me that they wanted to come up with new characters. So there were the stock Muppet characters that we used, and the idea was how we can come up and create new characters. And I think Clifford, the host, that was also they had designed that that Muppet for Kevin Clash, who was doing the voice. And they knew that's the puppet that they wanted Kevin to kind of be the voice of the host of the show. So in that sense, that kind of was all in place when I got there, or at least when I came on board for. Tell you what the next step was. Once I got hired, I hadn't met Brian Henson, and they were all in London doing Muppet Treasure Island, I think. That's what they were shooting. All the puppeteers and everybody, they were all in England doing that. So one of the nice things is as soon as I got the job, they said, we want you to go out and meet Brian Henson. So I flew to England and met Brian for the first time, who was directing the movie. And part of that weekend that I was there was supposed to be what he wanted to do was a little improv workshop with a lot of the stock kind of puppets that they had that the workshop in London had done, or at least that they had out there for the movie. They just had loads and loads of different puppets and Muppets, but ones that had never been seen before, but they were just kind of their stock go-to ones, probably for background and things like that. So the whole idea was me to go out there, meet everybody for the first time. We were going to do this kind of improv workshop where the puppeteers we'd roll out all the rows of the puppets and everything, and I'd set up these little scenarios and little scenes, and the puppeteers would kind of go with it and kind of start creating and see what we could come up with. So that was the second day I was there, that we were setting up this kind of improvisational afternoon to see if we could come up with any new characters in that respect, which we did. Bobo came out of that. Bill Beretta, who I is just one of the best. He came up with Bobo that day. I think he may have I'm not sure, but I thought Pepe, that little, the prawn, may have been that day. And I know he pulled that Johnny Fiamma puppet out from one of the rows of puppets and started doing that. And I think Brian pulled out Sal. That monkey puppet was there too. It was really, I thought, a very beneficial and creative afternoon. You can kind of tell with the old Muppets. You can tell with Frank Oz, and I never met Jim Henson. You can just kind of tell by looking at it. They had that kind of spark in terms of they'd improvise and kind of go off script every now and then. And I always thought Bill Beretta was one of those that really had that kind of working relationship too. So he was more than happy to get up there and put Bobo on and start fooling around with the voice and then improvising in scenes. But as it is with all kind of ensembles, which I've found kind of working on sketch even, not everybody likes to improvise. Those sets were built up about, I don't know how many feet high, so that the puppeteers could be underneath, the desk, but standing and holding their arms straight up with the Muppets on their hands. The first thing that I thought was odd that they put us on the air on Friday nights at the time, which was their TGIF nights, which were all sitcoms. It was Urkel's show and a couple of other shows. I don't know what else was on. But we were smack dab like in the middle from eight. It was 8 to 9. All I know is we were smack dab in the middle of two sitcoms. It seemed like, and one of them was that Urkel show. And I always thought, well, that's a little odd because first of all, we're not a sitcom. And the thing that I always thought about the Muppets, and they agree, and they'll tell you, it was a show that everybody in the family could watch, and it was on one level. The kids would watch it. There would always be jokes that were kind of above the kids' heads, but they didn't care because they wanted to be hip to the fact that maybe they didn't get every little reference either, so that the parents would kind of chuckle at these little asides and all of that stuff. And Friday night to me was not that night. That Friday night is when the parents go out. I always thought, well, we should have been on Sunday. We should have been on any night where the family kind of sits down as a family and can watch this thing. In that sense, I thought they were a little lost with us, sealed our fate with prime time with them, because I think what did we do? The first 13 maybe on ABC, and then went over to the Disney Channel for the remainder of that first season. Here's what was great about working on that show is that there was never any struggle to get guest stars. The fact that it was the Muppets, the guest stars were more than willing, the people when you reached out to them, to do the show because either somebody, one of the guest stars had kids and it was that age group, and the fact that they're doing the Muppets was a huge deal. So there was a lot of that, and we never had any. I didn't think we had any real problem getting guest stars. The challenge is how do you use them, which is always with guest stars. How do you use them so that they become part of the show, especially in that show, because ours it usually had some sort of one or two storylines kind of running through it in some respect. When we had Pierce Brosnan, he had just signed his James Bond deal, I think. So we wanted to Bond, and guys like Pierce were more than willing. I mean, we very seldom, if any, ran into a guest star that said, no, I don't want to touch that. I don't want to do that. So he was more than happy to kind of make fun of that character, and our whole thing with him was that in real life he was such a klutz, and he was always tripping or knocking things over. And he did Bond in one sketch where he was just picking up the wrong props, and it was fun, and that was kind of a little runner that we did for him. So in that sense, the challenge was not just to write funny sketches for our cast members and the Muppet characters, but to try to find a way to incorporate the guest stars and really give it a strong enough storyline, whatever kind of little runner that we could do for them. Pierce was great because he said to me, I'd like to do a fire eating act. So we wrote it into the thing at the very end of the episode. We only did one take. In the rehearsal, they put a lighter fluid in his mouth, and he said it tasted terrible, so I only put just a little bit in. But when we got ready to do the take, they had changed that out for a flavorless kind of fluid. So he filled his mouth completely. And you'll see it because we only did one take, well, you'll see it, and when he shoots the flame up into the air, I'm telling you, it goes up into the light rafters. There's so much flame coming out of his mouth. And what happened was there was some on his lips, and when the flame kind of shot back down, or his mouth was burning, his lips. And you can see in the take that the Muppets are all singing around going, hot, 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 singing the song. They're all dancing. And you could see him, he's singing, but just wiping at his mouth to try to stop the burning of his lips. And I remember after the take, it wasn't great. And I said, oh, geez, we just did this. This is the guy who just signed the contract to do James Bond, and now his mouth is burned. And I asked him, I said, you said you did this. He said, well, I did it in college once. I never did it before. And he told me he had never done it. Prince was another one. Prince called me and said, his only thing was it was at that time when he was battling with his record company, so you couldn't call him Prince, and it was the artist formerly known as. And he was fine with us playing with that. So we wrote that into the opening with Bobo, him trying to get into the studio. He came into the show, have the 2 songs or 3 songs that he did. He went into his studio and redid all the music on it and did new arrangements for the songs that he was doing, came with his own tracks. I mean, he was great. Rickles came on, Don Rickles came on, and he was funny because we had written something for him, but if you know of Don anyway, he's funniest when he's kind of off on his own. And so I did tell him at one point, you don't have to stick to the script. He said, everybody tells me that. Why don't you? I said, well, Don, you're hilarious. I mean, there are, when you can start with the script, but feel free to go, come back to it at the end. But feel free to have fun with it. And he was always saying, I don't know why every time I go somewhere they tell me the same thing. You don't have to stick with the script. I said, well, but because you're a genius when you kind of go off and free associate like that.